She was just trying to make a living, pregnant, alone, and working at a job she didn't deserve to lose. But when the billionaire ex she hadn't seen in years hired her to sing at his wedding, everything changed. What started as a second chance soon became a haunting reminder of the deep scars left by racism and betrayal. 500 guests would witness something so shocking, it would leave them speechless. But what happened next will make you question the very price of forgiveness. This isn't just her story, it's a story we all need to hear. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more powerful stories like this one.
Maria had always been a fighter. Pregnant, with a young daughter to care for, she did what she had to in order to survive. Every day was a struggle, a battle to stay afloat in a world that seemed determined to knock her down. Working as a waitress at a small diner, she never expected anything more. She was just grateful for a paycheck, for the roof over her head, and the little moments of peace she could share with her daughter. But things weren't always this hard. Years ago, she had been someone else, a woman in love who had once dreamed of a different life. Back then, she had been married to Marcus, the billionaire heir to a massive fortune. Their love was passionate, and for a brief moment, she thought it could conquer anything. But when the truth of their differences came to light, so did something darker, something that would come back to haunt her years later. Maria didn't know it yet, but her world was about to be flipped upside down in a way she never could have imagined. She thought she'd moved on. She thought the past was behind her. But the past has a way of creeping up when you least expect it. And one fateful phone call would change everything she knew about forgiveness, betrayal, and the price of redemption. She had always remembered Marcus, of course. How could she forget? The man who had swept her off her feet when they first met. The man who had promised her a life of luxury and happiness. She was young, naive, and in love. But Marcus was a man of two worlds, one of power and privilege, the other one where Maria fit. But she hadn't realized that back then. It all seemed perfect until it wasn't. After their divorce, Maria was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. It hadn't been easy. The public eye, the constant judgment, the whispers about their failed marriage. The scandal had followed her, made her feel like she wasn't good enough, that she wasn't worthy of the life she had once lived. She worked hard to move past that, raising her daughter alone, providing for them both in a world that seemed to always look down on her. But Marcus had moved on too. He married again, this time a woman from his world, a woman who fit the perfect image of his high society life. Maria couldn't bring herself to hate her. She couldn't bring herself to care, not really. But it still hurt, the way Marcus had moved on so easily, leaving her behind as if she had never mattered. She had been foolish to think that their love had meant something more. Still, she had built a life for herself. She had her daughter. And she had her job. Her life wasn't perfect, but it was enough, until that phone call. The number was unfamiliar, but the name on the caller ID made her stomach twist in a way she hadn't felt in years. Marcus. She hadn't heard from him in over 3 years. She wasn't sure what to feel. Was he calling to apologize, to offer something she didn't need? Maybe it was just some empty gesture. Whatever it was, Maria wasn't sure she could go back to that place of hurt, of betrayal, but she had to answer. His voice on the other end of the line was calm, almost too calm. "Maria, it's Marcus. I hope you're doing well." The words felt strange coming from him. His tone wasn't desperate, wasn't pleading. It was just casual, too casual. And yet it still felt like a knife twisting in her chest. She had hoped he would acknowledge the pain, the years of silence between them, but there was none of that. No apology, no explanation, just words. "I know this might seem out of the blue," he continued, "but I need you to do something for me." Maria felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She didn't know what he wanted, but she could feel the unease settling in. "I'm getting married next month," he said, his voice steady, "and I want you to sing at my wedding." The words hung in the air for a moment, almost like a punch to the gut. Maria wasn't sure how to respond. Her mind raced. Why would he want her, the woman he had discarded so easily? Was this some cruel joke, some twisted attempt at retribution? "Why me?" she asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. I know it's been a long time, but you've always had that something special," he said. "I can't imagine this day without you there. You've got the voice, Maria. You've always had the voice." The idea of it, the thought of standing in front of his guests, singing for the man who had betrayed her, who had left her behind, was almost too much to bear. But then something strange happened. A flicker of something stirred inside her. It wasn't anger or even resentment. It was curiosity, the chance to be seen again, to step back into the world she had once inhabited, the chance to reclaim something she had lost. But there was still the question that gnawed at her. Why would he ask her? Was this genuine, or was this something else entirely? She couldn't trust him. But there was a part of her that wondered if this could be the moment for her to finally close that chapter. She hesitated, the silence between them stretching. "Think about it," he said softly, almost too softly. "I'll make sure it's worth your while." Maria's heart skipped a beat. "I'll think about it," she replied, but she already knew what her answer would be. She didn't know it yet, but this invitation was more than just a chance to sing at a wedding. It was an invitation to confront the past, to face the ghosts that had been haunting her, to reclaim the strength she had lost when she walked away from that life. And it would change everything. Maria didn't sleep much that night. The phone call replayed in her mind over and over again, each word echoing like a drumbeat. She had promised to think about it, but the truth was, she knew what she was going to do. She had to do it, or at least that's what she told herself. The next few days passed in a blur. Maria kept telling herself she was just going to get through the day, just get to the wedding and sing, and then move on. But as the date approached, the weight of what she was about to do pressed heavier on her chest. This wasn't just any performance. This wasn't just singing for a paycheck. This was a confrontation with everything she had been through, everything she had lost. As the wedding day drew closer, Maria found herself standing in front of her mirror, looking at the woman who had been broken, pieced back together, and was now about to step into the very world that had discarded her. She ran her fingers over her stomach, feeling the weight of the baby growing inside her. She thought about the daughter she was raising on her own, how strong she had to be, how much she had fought to make sure her daughter would never feel the way she had been made to feel. The morning of the wedding came, and Maria's stomach churned with nerves. She wasn't sure if she could do this, but she had made the choice. She had told herself she would go, that this was an opportunity for closure, that this was a chance to show Marcus and everyone else that she wasn't the same woman she had been when she walked away from him. She wasn't just the ex-wife, the woman who had been cast aside. Her dress was simple, just something she had picked up from a local store. It wasn't glamorous like the other guests would be wearing. It wasn't elegant like the bride's gown with its layers of lace and silk. But Maria wasn't there to compete. She wasn't there to be seen as anything other than who she was, a woman who had fought to survive in a world that never seemed to want her. She arrived at the venue early. It was an extravagant estate, the kind of place she had once dreamed of but could never afford. The mansion was nestled in a beautiful garden, with towering trees and fountains that sparkled under the sun. Maria couldn't help but feel out of place. The wealth, the luxury, the polished smiles. It was a world she had once been part of, but now it felt like a distant memory. As she walked through the grand hall, her heels echoing off the marble floors, she saw people mingling, laughing, dressed in their finest. The men in tuxedos and the women in gowns, their laughter ringing through the air like the clinking of glasses. Maria felt the sharp sting of judgment in their eyes. She was the outsider here, the woman who had once belonged but now stood at the edge of their world. She was ushered backstage, away from the guests, where she would wait until it was time for her to sing. The staff treated her with a cold politeness, a distant professionalism that only served to remind her how out of place she was. She sat quietly, her mind racing, her heart pounding. She had agreed to this, but now in the quiet backstage, she wasn't sure if she was making a huge mistake. The familiar weight of being othered began to settle in. The staff didn't speak to her unless they had to. The guests barely acknowledged her as she passed by. She was just another hired hand, just another piece of the show. And then the sound of the ceremony began, and Maria knew her time had come. When they called her to the stage, she walked forward, her heart pounding in her chest. The room was silent as the guests turned to watch her. She could feel their eyes on her, cold and judgmental. She could hear their whispers, the quiet gasps as they took in her presence. She was the ex-wife, the black woman they didn't expect to see, the outsider. Maria took her place at the microphone. She could feel the weight of their gazes, the silence pressing down on her like a heavy blanket, but she didn't look at them. She didn't need to. She looked straight ahead, focusing on the moment, on the song, on the act of reclaiming what she had lost. And then she began to sing. Her voice filled the room, powerful and full of emotion. The song was simple, one that had meant something to her, a reflection of her journey, her struggles, and her triumphs. She poured every ounce of herself into it. The lyrics, the melody, the emotions, it was all there, raw and unfiltered. But as she sang, she felt it, the judgment, the coldness of the room, the whispers, the side glances. They didn't want her here. They didn't want her to be a part of this moment. She could see it in their eyes. She could feel the discomfort, the unwillingness to accept her presence. Marcus was sitting at the front, his eyes locked on her as she sang. His expression was unreadable, his face cold and distant. She couldn't tell if he was embarrassed or proud, if he even remembered the woman he had once loved. All she could see was the distance between them, the years that had passed, and the gulf that had grown between them. She had hoped for a moment of reconciliation, for some sign that Marcus remembered who she was, but there was nothing. He was the same man who had cast her aside, the same man who had moved on without a second thought. And in that moment, Maria realized something. She wasn't singing for him. She wasn't singing for the guests. She wasn't even singing for the woman who had once been his bride. She was singing for herself, for the woman she had become. for the woman who had learned to survive, to fight, and to rise above the judgment and the hurt. And then, just as she hit the final note, a small cough from the back of the room caught her attention. It wasn't just any cough, it was deliberate. It was almost like a signal. Maria paused for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. The sound had cut through her song, through the wall she had put up, and she could feel it. A shift in the room, a tension that was suddenly palpable. Something was about to happen, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. She tried to keep her focus, but the weight of the eyes upon her grew unbearable. The whispers started to rise again, louder this time, more pointed. The room was no longer silent. The judgment had shifted from subtle to open, and Maria realized that she was being dismissed, not just as a performer, but as a person. And that realization hit her like a punch to the gut. The whispers in the room grew louder, and Maria could feel every pair of eyes on her, piercing through her like daggers. The tension was palpable, suffocating. She could hear the subtle murmur of judgment, the hushed voices, the occasional gasp as her song trailed off. It wasn't just the crowd's discomfort anymore, it was open disdain, the kind that made her feel like a spectacle, a token, a reminder of a world they didn't want to acknowledge. The walls of the venue felt like they were closing in on her. And then it happened. Maria had just finished the final line of the song, the last note hanging in the air. When she saw it, Marcus stood up. At first, she thought maybe he was going to approach her, maybe offer some kind of apology or support. But as his figure towered over the crowd, the look on his face froze her in place. He wasn't looking at her with affection or even guilt. He was looking at her with something far colder, disdain, embarrassment. And that was when it hit her, the real reason why he had asked her here. It wasn't because he wanted to reconnect. It wasn't because he remembered the love they had once shared. It was a way for him to erase the past, to show his guests that he had moved on. To parade her in front of them like a relic from a bygone life, something to be looked at but never touched, something to be seen but never acknowledged. Maria's breath caught in her throat, the weight of the moment crashing over her. She had been foolish to think she could step back into this world, to think that she would be accepted, that the past would be forgotten. She wasn't a guest here. She was a performer, a reminder of something they had all pushed aside. Before she could react, Marcus spoke. His voice was loud enough for the entire room to hear, and it cut through her like a blade. "That's enough, Maria," he said, his words dripping with an emotion she couldn't quite place. She froze. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Enough. He wasn't asking her to stop. He was telling her as though she was a mere servant to cut her performance short, to stop being part of his life, to stop being a part of the past that he was so desperately trying to bury. Her heart dropped to the pit of her stomach. She had spent so long fighting to move on, to rise above the shadows of their broken marriage, but this was something else. This was the ultimate rejection. She wasn't even allowed the dignity of finishing the song she had poured herself into. The crowd went silent. It was like the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. Some guests turned away, awkwardly pretending not to notice. Others shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to react. But Maria saw them. She saw the way they looked at her, as if she didn't belong, as if she was an intruder in a world that had never wanted her. She saw the whispers. She saw the judgment. But what hurt the most wasn't the judgment of the crowd. It was the cold, impassive look on Marcus's face. The man she had loved, the man who had promised her the world, was now standing there, distant and indifferent, as if she were nothing more than a stranger. Maria stood there frozen, trying to grasp what had just happened. She had hoped for reconciliation. She had hoped that this moment would be different, but instead it was everything she feared. It wasn't just that he had moved on. It was that he had moved on without a single glance back. And in that moment, Maria realized just how little she meant to him now. She felt her body tense, her fists clenching at her sides. She couldn't stay there any longer. The air in the room was thick with discomfort, and she couldn't breathe. She had to leave. She had to escape the suffocating weight of this rejection, the coldness that permeated everything around her. But before she could move, the whispers in the room grew louder. Some guests began to murmur amongst themselves, exchanging glances, and Maria could hear it now. The judgment was no longer subtle. It was open. They weren't just uncomfortable, they were mocking her, laughing behind her back, making her feel like a ghost in a place where she didn't belong. She had always known that this world wasn't hers, but now, in the face of their laughter, she felt the full weight of it. "Look at her," someone whispered. "What's she doing here?" Maria's face burned. She had always been able to ignore the whispers, the sideways glances, but this was different. She wasn't just being looked at with pity. She was being dismissed, degraded, as if everything she had been through, everything she had endured had amounted to nothing. The final blow came when a man in the back of the room stood up. His voice rang out over the crowd, cutting through the tension like a knife. "You really think you belong here?" he sneered. "You're nothing but a reminder of what he used to have." Maria's heart skipped a beat. she felt the anger and humiliation swell inside her, rising like a tidal wave. This wasn't just about her anymore. This wasn't just about Marcus or the crowd. It was about the way the world saw her, the way they saw women like her, the way they saw people like her, black, rejected, out of place. She felt the sting of tears in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had fought for so long, and she wasn't about to give in now. Not in front of them, not in front of Marcus, not after everything she had been through. With a strength she didn't know she had, Maria straightened her back. She didn't need their approval. She didn't need their acceptance. And with one final defiant look at the crowd, at Marcus, at the guests, at everyone who had judged her, Maria walked out. She didn't run, she didn't look back, but as she reached the door she heard it again, the whispers, the laughter. And it was then that she realized this wasn't just about her. This was about everything they couldn't see, everything they refused to acknowledge. This was about the truth of her existence, the truth of who she was, and Maria wasn't going to let them take that from her.